I think you need some fresh ideas, some fresh vision. You need someone that's probably going to be a little bit disruptive if you really want to see the church grow.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of the LeadingSmart Podcast, where this season we are talking about pastoral succession. And in today's episode, we're talking about when there's an internal candidate, is that an opportunity or is that a landmine? So I'll throw it over to you, Tim. What do you think? Opportunity or landmine?
I think it is an opportunity with some landmines.
You're saying it's both.
Yes.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. Absolutely. I mean, I'm guessing every leader would agree with this. Like, man, if we could raise someone up and get them ready for the next role, whatever the role is, that's awesome, right? We don't have to spend money finding someone from outside. It's like we've got someone internally who's ready. They already have our DNA. So great opportunity. Let's talk a bit though, like what is an internal candidate? So it might be obvious, like, okay, it's someone that's already on staff. And that could be it. It also could be someone who's just like used to be on staff. They're no longer here. Internal candidate means just someone you have a connection to that knows you really well, that you know really. It could have been a guest speaker that you've had speak 6 times a year for the last 3 years. And they're like, so they feel like they're one of you. They're kind of internal. Also, like, how do they become internal? One way is they put their name in the hat and say, I know we're looking for a senior pastor and I want to be considered. Or you ask them to put their name in the hat, or you think maybe they should put their name in the hat. You're like, you got maybe on your board, you've got 3 people that think, oh man, they'd be great. And 3 people are like, I don't see that at all. So but they're possibly an internal candidate.
Where do you see that there are often like leadership development pathways in the churches that you work with that are intentional about succession? Or is this often an afterthought of like, oh, it's 5 years from now, I needed to succeed. Who can I look at on my team to develop? Does that make sense? Yeah,
it makes sense. So I'll give a nuanced answer to that as well. I don't often see formal leadership development paths. Most churches don't have that dialed in. Most churches want it, and they're trying to figure it out. But what I do see a lot is where they've got a student pastor or a teaching pastor or a campus pastor who, long before succession's even brought up, people are thinking, oh, wow, they actually could be the next pastor here.
Yeah.
If it's like the current senior pastor and the board that are having that conversation, what do we need to do to get them ready? Like, well, they've never actually led a board or been in a board meeting. Let's start pulling them into board meetings. They've actually never led staff. They're a teaching pastor. They actually haven't led a department or led staff. Let's start giving them some more responsibility for leading staff. They've never been involved in raising funds. Okay, let's figure out how to get them involved in that. So I think if you do have some intentionality and foresight on that, you can help get them ready.
Yeah, it's probably a whole different season, but that leadership development piece is so important. We do executive pastor gatherings a couple times a year, and the content is curated from the attendees, and we send out a survey, and leadership development is always one of the top 3 issues. But then when we dive deep in that topic and we ask, the executive pastors that are there, what are you doing that's working? There's really not many answers.
Yeah.
And so we're all just trying to figure this out together. And so I do think having that as an intentional part of your rhythms, there's a church out in California that I think has started to do this really well, where they've identified those across the organization, not just succession for the senior pastor, but across the organization, who are those second generation leaders that we can start inviting. I think once a month, they get to sit in and observe the executive meetings, Because, when you get there and you're like, I've never even been in an executive meeting before. Right. I don't know how this works. So really appreciate you pointing that out. Okay, so talk to us about when promoting the senior pastor internally works and when it doesn't, because you've seen both sides of this equation.
Yeah, so if your church is growing, it's healthy, it's on a good trajectory, that's a great time to look for someone internally or to consider someone internally, because it's working. Like, you want whatever's working, you want to keep going. Because if you hire someone, if in that case you bring someone in from the outside, there is going to be disruption. It might be a little disruption. It might be a lot of disruption. It might be, we're going this way and we're gonna just go a couple degrees to the left or a couple degrees to the right, or it might be massive shift because they're just they're wired different. They're different leaders. So If the church is in decline, plateaued, then I think that's when you really should probably not have someone from within, unless maybe they haven't been on the team for very long. So they're kind of like an external hire where they've only been with you for 2 years or 4 years. And so they're going to bring a lot of freshness. But if they've been with you for 10 or 15 or 20 years, they've kind of grown up under your leadership. And for whatever reason, the church is in decline. I think you need some fresh ideas, some fresh vision. You need someone that's probably going to be a little bit disruptive if you really want to see the church grow.
Yeah. What other landmines that we need to be aware of when we're thinking about that internal candidate?
So one landmine, and one thing I would say just to avoid, is you don't want to let that person know too soon that you are considering them or that you think they're a viable candidate. A lot of times you have pastors on your team, they're, again, running student ministry or their young adult ministry or their small groups pastor, and they're doing their job well, and it's fine, and they're happy. And then you say, like, man, I really see you as being the senior pastor someday. Instantly, that changes something mentally and emotionally for that person. It may not be a bad thing, but what it could result in is that they're not going to wait around for the process. Another landmine I would say would be doing the American Idol thing where you're like, hey, you could be our guy, but we're also going to do a national search, and we're going to just stack you up against 4 or 5 other candidates. And at the end of the day, we're going to see, do we like you as much as we like these others?
Yeah.
And that's just emotionally difficult for that person to go through because they love their church, they love doing what they're doing, and suddenly they're kind of put up against others on like, are they good enough? And what will happen is, like, to whatever degree people in your church, it could be just the board, it could be some board and key leaders, whatever, they know this process is happening. And usually if you're doing a national search, like the whole church knows because it's public, people start taking sides. Like, they just can't help it. They're like, man, I hope you're the guy. I hope you get this. And other people won't say it to them, but they'll be thinking like, oh, I hope we find someone else.
Right.
And you're just going to end up with winners and losers at the end of that. Also, hardly ever does an internal candidate, especially in that kind of process, but really in any kind of process where they know their name's in the hat and they know they're being considered for this role, if they don't get it, rarely ever, like less than 1 in 10, do they stay at the church.
Yep.
So you may end up losing your senior pastor who's retiring or transitioning, and you're losing maybe your second highest capacity person on your team who went through the process, didn't get it, and then probably ends up leaving, probably ends up leading another church.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because that high capacity person is like, hey, you saw something in me, or, I heard that, or I desire that, and I didn't get that opportunity. So I'm going to go operate elsewhere in those gifts and calling that I believe I'm called to. So,
and the whole time that they're being considered, they're dreaming about it. They're like, when I become senior pastor, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to pull this person over onto my team, I'm going to hire. They're just dreaming about it. And then you get to the end of that process, and suddenly you're like, you're not the person. And then like, they're probably going to go be that person somewhere else. Yeah. That's another reason to, like, another landmine is having that process go too long with specifically an internal candidate. When we're working with churches, we try to get the decision on an internal candidate, a green light or red light, within 3 to 4 months from the time the process starts. From the time you ask them to put their name in the hat, or they ask you, can they put their name in the hat? From that time, no longer than 3 to 4 months before you're giving them a yes or a no. Again, because it's very emotional for that individual and for their spouse, for their family to be kind of drawn through that. Worked with a church 4 or 5 years ago that went through this process, and they had a traumatic change of pastors, or loss of a pastor, I should say. And so this person became the interim pastor, and they were asked to be the interim for 3 months, and then 3 more months, and then 3 more months. And a few months in, they asked if they could put their name in the hat, because they actually, after 6 months, 9 months of leading this interim role, they liked it. Like, they didn't think they were going to, but they liked it. And so this church kind of did the American Idol thing, and they said, okay, we'll consider you with others, stacked them up against 6 or 8 or 10 others, ultimately didn't get the job. Very, very difficult, emotionally just exhausting for that family. Why they're leading a church that's kind of in an interim season at the same time. And so they ultimately left and needed some time to recover after that. So make that as short as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've identified that there is an internal candidate potential, right? Either the board or the senior pastor. What are some ways that we can objectively as possible evaluate that internal candidate? Because you did advise against, putting them against an external search.
Yeah.
So because sometimes we're so close to it. There's emotional pieces wrapped up in it. Maybe it's the senior pastor's best friend,
Yeah.
How can we objectively as possible assess if that is the right person that God's calling to the church?
Yeah. So we're going to talk, we have 2 episodes coming towards the end of this season. One is on pulling together a succession team. Like, do you need a succession or a transition team? And then who should be there? And we're also going to talk about developing that lead pastor profile. So those are just 2 important things is before you consider internal candidates or external candidates, like figure out who you're looking for.
Yeah.
Like really kind of put on paper, like the non-negotiables, like they have to have these things in their portfolio or in their toolbox or in their character. And then here's some things, man, it'd be great. Icing on the cake. It'd be great if they also had these things and put those on paper. And what it will do is it might rule out like, well, we're not even going to ask them to put their name in the hat. Or someone's going to come on your radar. It's like, we actually should ask that. We hadn't even thought about this person, but we should ask them because they actually match who we're looking for. And then with the team, we'll talk about again in a future episode, but like an objective team, I think can be super helpful. So it's not just the board. I think it's helpful to have a couple board members on there.
Like a search team.
A search team, succession team, transition team.
Yeah.
I actually like the term like transition or succession team more than search team.
Yeah.
Search team is a search, and there's a lot more to that process.
And that implies an external search.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just to go through that process of like, just get some objective people that, and again, we'll talk about who should be on that team, but they love Jesus, they love the church, they don't have an agenda, and they're pretty wise, and then they can be involved in that process to help you objectively vet that person.
Speaking of transitions, like I've said that a million times on this season so far, we're going to transition to our segment on rants versus raves. What you got today, Tim?
So I'm going rave. And so for context, I'm on a lot of airplanes. So I think last year, 140 different flights. This year, it's end of April. I've been like on 60 flights. So a lot of flights. I love being on airplanes. I love being on airplanes.
What do you love about it?
I always pick a window seat because I sit there every single time on an airplane. I'm amazed that I'm 37,000 feet in the air. I'm sipping my Diet Dr. Pepper. I've got my laptop in front of me. I got Wi-Fi. And you think about like thousands of years of history, how many people have been able to see the earth from that vantage point?
Ooh,
like it's just been in the last 100 years.
That point before.
Yeah, you think about billions of people have never seen it. They've dreamed about like being in the sky or whatever. And we get to be in the sky like 3 times a week, 7 times a week.
Well, the aliens probably have seen, from...
Okay, but I'm keeping it grounded to earthlings.
I just ruined your like really beautiful, reflective
I think it's
moment.
amazing. Another thing, like just practically for like an introvert and someone who has to get work done, my phone doesn't ring.
Yes.
Like I can actually get a lot of work done on an airplane. So like if you look at my calendar, you'll see flight from, Denver to Chicago, and right beside it, you'll see projects, and I'll like calendar a project for every flight that I'm on.
That's really smart.
So get a lot done.
I think I told you this the other day. I feel like I do my best work, like deep work on airplanes.
Yeah.
I do get, well, this is not good. I have a rant. This was not gonna be my rant, but my rant is when you are on an airplane and the Wi-Fi doesn't work.
That's first world probs.
I know, but like I have to like lower my expectations, because like so for example, my flight here to Chicago, I had a project I really wanted to get done, and I was so excited to be able to like have those creative juices working, and then the Wi-Fi didn't work, and that was.
And you're probably going to tell me it was United Airlines again.
It sure was. Speaking of rants, well, the rant that I was going to do today was when I'm about to say, when men don't wear their wedding rings. And I don't know why it doesn't bother me as much when women don't wear theirs. I guess I'm being sexist here, but and my husband, the wonderful Tate, who I love dearly, he doesn't wear his. And
is it because his hands get hot and sweaty?
No, it's because he fidgets with them and he loses them.
That's my
deal. I'm really glad that we did not buy him, like his wedding ring is a cheap, like $38 Amazon one.
Like with a silicone kind of?
No, it's like starts with a T. What's that like?
Titanium.
I don't think it's titanium, but another
turquoise.
No. Maybe it is
It's
titanium.
terrific.
It was terrific. And it kind of had like a fake wood look in the middle. Anyway.
Okay. Teak.
I don't know. But that is
Should
a
I stop
keyword.
guessing keywords?
Yeah. But, gave it to him for the wedding. I think he had it for like 3 months before he lost it. Bought him another one. Probably had that one for a year. And then he did buy the silicone ones and he fidgets with them. They roll under the seat in the car. They roll under the couch, like whatever. So then he just doesn't really wear one as much. But anyway, I don't know why it bothers me. But you don't wear a wedding ring, but you get an excuse because...
you may notice that I don't have one. But for the same reason, because I lost them. I lost my first one, and then I lost the second one. My wife says I didn't lose the second one. She says she knows where it's at. Oh. I don't know where it's at, so in that case, it's lost. But anyway, I did get a tattoo with my wife's initial. So if she dies or leaves me, I have to marry someone else that starts with F.
Oh, no.
So, but we've been married for 34 years. Probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
The death part might, but...
And when did you got that a few years ago? It hasn't been very long.
It's been like four years ago.
And then does Faith have one that says T? Or does she wear her
She wears her wedding ring.
Yeah.
Except she works at Starbucks, so she can't wear a wedding ring when she's working.
Sense.
So I think she has a silicone one she wears when she's at work.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's my rant.
All
Dudes, wear your wedding rings. It's the right thing to do. Yeah.
Perfect.
On that note, join us for episode 6, where we're going to talk about money and succession. Lots of different ways we're going to go with this. We're going to talk about finances and money and stewardship. So we'll talk to you then. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I wanted to invite you to download our Pastoral Succession ebook at LeadingSmart.com. We do a deep dive of all of the things that we've been talking about this season. And so you can download it for free at LeadingSmart.com and walk through it by yourself or your team or your board. So go to LeadingSmart.com to download the Pastoral Succession ebook today.